Okay, we are live. We are live. Live on YouTube at Abu Gaddafi. Live on Instagram at Abu Gaddafi. Assalamu alaikum. We'll get started in a brief moment. Any questions? Peace, peace. And here we go. Boom. That's gonna be. I'm gonna pin that. All right. So then, all the questions will be asked. All that questions will be answered in the end. Just want to keep that there so it stays. I pray everyone is doing well on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. Uh, Pray everyone is healthy physically, mentally, healthy emotionally, healthy spiritually. Those health is even more important than quote unquote wealth. Health is more important than quote unquote wealth. So I pray everyone is in best of health. I pray everyone is in best of health. Okay, so before we get started, you can open up in the name of Allah, who appeared in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, to whom we forever and ever give praise and thanks for raising a divine leader, teacher, guide, and perhaps most importantly, an example in the person of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. In these two great and holy names, I greet the brothers and the sisters in the universal understanding of peace, understanding, the result of both knowledge and wisdom, understanding of peace. Assalamu alaikum. For those of us who are unfamiliar, there should not be anybody who's unfamiliar with Assalamu alaikum. Uh, if there is anyone unfamiliar with Assalamu alaikum, uh, no shade to you, but you got to catch up. Assalamu alaikum simply just means may peace be with you uh, in English. So Assalamu alaikum is the Arabic form of may peace be with you. Jesus and all the prophets in the Bible, uh, all the prophets in the Torah, and all the prophets and messengers in the Holy Quran all greeted each other with peace. And to my knowledge, according to the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, none of those individuals spoke English. They did not speak the English language. They spoke in Hebrew, Arabic, and Aramaic. And in Arabic, we say, may peace be with you. In Arabic, that says, assalamu alaikum. Okay, so now that that is established and continues to be established, aloha to my locals or those of you who speak or can understand in Hawaii, in Hawaii. Um, it's the same concept, aloha, peace. Okay, today's lecture title: False Promises, Failed Duties, and an Invincible Truth. False promises, failed duties, and an invincible truth. So before we get started on that, we have a brief, you can call it a mantra, prayer, to establish our mind frame in asking Allah. Of course, we seek refuge in God alone. So that's who we go to when we are in need of anything. And because I know that I'm in need of establishing and constructing a particular frame of mind, so I ask Allah. I ask, dear Lord, please give me the wisdom to do the thing you put me on this earth to do in a way that pleases you and serves the people you put me here to serve. To me, that's of the utmost importance. Um, Seeking wisdom, Again, we established the fact that we have access to a lot of worldly wisdom, um, and obviously, the worldly wisdom has not served us. And if it's not serving us, then it's not giving us the strength and the ability to serve anyone else. Uh, and so we don't want that. We want a divine wisdom because we are subjected to divine problems. And when you have divine problems, the divine wisdom will only point you to divine solutions, which brings us here today. Okay, so all praises are due to Allah, all praises are due to God. Um, as we continue, again, the title today is False Promises, Failed Duties, and Invincible Truth, and an Invincible Truth. So I want to remind us briefly the instruction in the Bible wherein it says, Seek ye first the kingdom. Seek ye first the kingdom, and all these things shall be added unto you. Seek ye first the kingdom and all its righteousness. Seek ye first the kingdom and all its righteousness. So those go hand in hand, seeking the kingdom and establishing its righteousness. And all these things that we desire and that we want and we chase after, they'll be added unto you, which is important across the board, but it's especially important today because we're faced with so many different distractions. There are an abundant, a plethora, so many different distractions that we could lose focus. And so this particular verse in the Bible, it helps to keep us focused on a particular task. There's that old quote that says, um, where attention goes, intention goes. So wherever your attention is, that's where your intention is. I may be misquoting that. Excuse me. Where attention goes, energy flows. That's the proper way to say that. I like the other one too. I've never heard it before, so we just they go interchangeable. Where attention goes, intention goes. It's the old saying is where in where attention goes, energy flows. And so if we can maintain that focus on our attention and intention being on seeking the kingdom, that's where our energy will flow. It will flow in one uh, particular area. That's like a sniper as opposed to a machine gun. You know, snipers are much more precise. They have precision, which is interesting because the two viral activities in these last couple of days have been one, the sniper with the Donald Trump assassination attempt, and also the Olympic sports from the man from Turkey doing the shooting. I don't know exactly what it's called, but anyway, both of those, not to compare them, one in the Olympics and the other is a threat to human life. However, the common factor being precision. So when it comes to dealing with God, divine nature, divine problems and solutions, we want to establish precision. We don't want to be like machine guns and just because then you have innocent bystanders. We don't. That's a waste of time. Precise, even in the lessons, mistakes shall not exist. It doesn't mean that they don't happen, but mistakes shall not exist. So you learn from those mistakes. Okay, not to get too far off topic. Last week we discussed false promises in the message to the black man, and we also discussed the first and the last and the greatest trick that the devil used to deceive us, being the people of God. First, we established that it was the woman, not the serpents or the devil's woman, but he uses our own woman. And I want to further highlight today the relationship between the woman in the Message to the Black Man and Kamala Harris going into not necessarily discussing the woman because that's already been established. And I don't want to come off as seeming misogynistic. And I think we need a lot of support from our sisters. We need a lot of support from each other. So that's not the point. The point is to highlight false promises. So I'm going to go again in Message to the Black Man, this time on page 258. In Message to the Black Man, page 258. Page 258 in Message to the Black Man, wherein it says, beware of false promises. I'm going to read this first, and then I'm going to read a description of the last rally from Kamala Harris, and we're going to go in and discuss some of these things. So it says here, beware of false promises. It's page 258 in Message to the Black Man. It says, the government only wants to pacify her once slaves with fancy false promises that she knows she cannot fulfill without the loss of friendship and bloodshed among her own people. I'm going to read that one more time. It says, the government only wants to pacify her once slaves. Now, I don't want us to get caught up on this word once slaves, because what it is sometimes we can hear something and be either triggered or we can completely shut off from it. And so I don't want us to become triggered or shut ourselves out from this word that here says once slaves. Because if we can identify slavery, it's a whole spectrum. You know how they put on no disrespect, they put on autism has a spectrum. It's a wide spectrum. It's like temperature. Temperature is also on a spectrum. There's no hot is not opposite from cold, because at what point does the temperature change from hot to cold? It's on a spectrum. So on the far end, on one end is completely hot, temperature is hot. And then the far end of the other end, the temperature is cold. So there are a lot of things that are in our environment that are not necessarily opposite, but they're rather on a spectrum. And so slavery, no disrespect, but also is on a spectrum, because everyone is involved, whether on your one far end being a slave or far on the other end being a slave owner. You're still enslaved to your desires. You're a slave to your greed. So that spectrum doesn't necessarily change. It just varies by degrees, like temperature. So when it says her once slaves, this is all encompassing to the United States of America and every single person that has been caught up in this spectrum in their karma, the things that they have done, the destruction that they brought on themselves, because they brought destruction to the face of original people in the hills in North America and across the planet. So that spectrum has to be established. So we don't want to get caught up in words where it's like her once slaves, because some people can be like, well, just like in the Bible, you got the Jews says, I've never been enslaved to anybody. Well, then you've been a slave to your desires. You've been enslaved to your greed. And so here it's talking about, here it says, the government only wants to pacify her once slaves. A lot of us subjected in the hells of North America are still slaves. We still are, quote unquote, slaves. This is particularly speaking to original people, so-called Negro. But remember, we spoke on FDR, when in order to appease black people, he didn't focus just on black people, he focused on poor people. That way he could maximize his votes. This is deception. And so we want to keep that in mind. What we're doing, a reminder, we're transitioning out of. This is called repent. Repent means to change the way you think. So this is a process of repentance for us. We are transitioning outside of the mind of dependency, outside of the mind of subject or slavery, and transitioning into the mind of rulership.
transitioning to the mind of producers rather than consumers. So this information we don't want to consume. We want to make it material so that we can produce a righteous result from this righteous information. And so I'm going to do my best to slow down a little bit so that we can go over this material and transition our minds from just consumers. This is not entertainment. We are transitioning from consumer to producer. We want to be productive. We want to be productive human beings on the face of the planet Earth. So, a reminder, it says the government only wants to pacify her once slaves with fancy false promises that she knows she cannot fulfill without the loss of friendship and bloodshed among her own people. And so I want to read some things that Kamala Harris, she had a rally in Atlanta, Georgia. My people, Atlanta, Georgia. And there were some promises that she made, and I want to highlight the promises so that we can go into these promises utilizing our productive mind, our royal mind, not the consumer mind, as those who are participating in the rally. So we keeping in mind that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is telling us to beware of false promises because the government only wants to pacify us. Keeping in mind to be aware of the false promises or promises in general, because you don't know if they're false when they're being made. Now we can say they're false because they have a track record. But when promises are being made, you don't know that they're false until it's too late. That's part of the problem. It's because we're not thinking like producers, we're thinking like consumers. So we transition out of that. We being like Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches and Dr. Yusuf Bey taught, an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. So we want to be proactive and not react. So it says here, beware of false promises. We want to be proactive, not react. Beware of false promises. The government only wants to pacify her once slaves. So now let's look into some of this pacification that Kamala Harris, some promises that she made. It says here, on day one, I will take on corporate price gouging and bring down costs. So the first thing she says on day one, the first thing she's going to do is take on corporate price gouging and bring down costs. So corporate price gouging is when you're charging ridiculous prices just because you can. For example, when during COVID, all the toilet paper was gone and people started charging ridiculous prices for toilet paper because the supply didn't meet the demand. That's called price gouging. So just charging ridiculous prices just because you can. It's unethical. It's immoral. So what she's saying is, one day I will take on, oh no, excuse me, not one day. On day one, I will take on corporate price gouging and bring down costs. We will ban more of the hidden fees and surprise late charges that banks and other companies use to pad their profits. We will take on corporate landlords and cap unfair rent increases. And she further asserted that her administration would also take on big pharma to lower prescription drug costs. Now, she said this in her Atlanta, Georgia rally to a crowd of black folks, original peoples. She had Megan Thee Stallion and Quavo, I believe. I didn't watch too much of it, but I did see clips. And so all this going on, taking a step back, if you're not involved and you're not a consumer, you're not there to consume her words in a political sense, and you take a step back, you can see the tricks and deceptions that are going on. We can ask, what does these rappers, Megan Thee Stallion and Quavo, what do they participate? How do they relate to the government? They don't. So what they are doing is being used as jesters to further the court's interest. This terminology is used when we talk about seeking the kingdom. If you can see the principles in someone else's kingdom, you can establish your own. You can't establish something that you don't have. It's like you can't build a house without having the material to build with, the lumber or stone, whichever material you choose to use. You have to be able to acknowledge the principles and actions that are happening in the kingdom that you're currently subjected to. So they introduced to us Megan the Stallion, a jester, Quavo, a jester, to perpetuate their court's desires and to further manipulate us. We should be able to be wise enough to question the actions that they're using, specifically Kamala Harris, who we established is a trick to deceive the people of God. Time and time again, she will change. We know it as code switching, which I don't personally believe there's anything wrong with quote unquote code switching, because to me, it's speaking a different language. Like if somebody speaks Spanish, you're going to speak Spanish. If someone speaks English, you're going to speak English. The problem that I have with her ability to do so, because as original people, we should be able to adapt and articulate things in a way to where that person understands. Even in our lessons, it says you can never teach a people if you can't speak their language. So I understand that need to be able to articulate something in a certain way to this person, and another person won't be able to understand unless you articulate it in a different way. I do not think that the way in which Kamala Harris does it is righteous for two reasons. One, it is condescending because she's looking down on our original people. She's looking down on our native folk, our black people. She's looking down on us because in her mind, oh, they can't understand me unless I speak, in Ebonics, rather than understanding that we are an intelligent people. She doesn't normally speak like that. Another reason why I think that it is condescending is because it's deceptive. She's doing that only for acceptance, not to articulate a message for our benefit. She's doing it to be deceptive so that people can vote for her. It's the deceptive aspects of politics. So, with that being said, I want to highlight and remind us about FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, as a Democrat, the things that he did, because I'm reminding you, at one point in time, original people, our black folks, when we did participate in voting, we voted more Republican than we did Democrat at one point in time, because the Republican Party was in the public against slavery and against us being, treated unfairly in the public. In the private, we know that they had their own agenda. However, the transition switched. It was always zigzag, but when Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, had a bill to help poor people, that's when the black people who originally voted Republican began to switch over to vote Democrat, because FDR didn't initially focus on black people, on our specific struggles. He picked a struggle that we could relate to, which is poverty. And so we were like, well, he's getting us paid, so we might as well vote for him. Now, keep that in mind. The economics, the poverty, things that if we're focused on our survival mind, again, we have a survival mind and we have a thrival mind. A mind that only focuses on our survival. Those of us who are poor or are worried or anxious and depressed all the time is because we're stuck in our survival mode. We see no quote unquote hope, or we see no visions of a better existence or a better future. So we're stuck on immediate gratification. What's going to help me now? I don't care about tomorrow. I don't care about no future, about tomorrow. I don't even care about 4 years from now. What you gonna do for me today? And so, because according to our teachings, 10% of the collective has knowledge of how to control the 85%. They're utilizing that technology to control the rest of us. And 5% of us has knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. So we should not get too caught up into the deception. Now, I don't want to get too far off topic. I will say, keeping in mind the economics. So our money is directly tied to our emotions in survival mode. This is a part of the reason why they say don't buy a house with your emotions. And how in The Godfather he was saying, is business, is nothing personal. Because when you're in survival mode, your money is tied directly to your emotions. You don't do one without the other. You spend with your feelings. And that's why we can't keep our money. We can't even save it because we feel like we need to spend it, especially in survival mode. And the thing about survival mode is it's a vicious cycle because you don't see a vision for your future. You don't see any escape out of poverty, out of hopelessness, out of anxiety. You only do things to perpetuate that survival mode. For example, you can be working, somebody could bless you with a good amount of money that you're not used to. And if you don't have a plan, you're gonna go spend that money on the things that keep you in poverty. You might go and buy some beer, some weed, buy some type of drugs to alleviate the pain because you're looking for an immediate gratification. You're looking to be immediately satisfied rather than be disciplined and say, you know what, this is a good amount of money, $1,000. I'm gonna hold on to it. I might spend here on bills or take care of the things that need to be taken care of, but the rest, I'm going to put it for a better future for myself and my family. So most people don't necessarily think that way because a plan has not been established for their mind because they're stuck in survival. And that system is perpetuated. It only takes somebody to think outside of survival to say that, no, I'm going to be disciplined. Discipline is the key, and consistency is the key to get you outside of survival and into thrival. So, with that being said, keeping in mind how our money is connected to our emotions. So, just like Franklin D. Roosevelt, he used the economy to get the majority of voters to vote for him. That's the same similar that Kamala Harris is doing to rally black folks and women and those of people who primarily vote Democrat who aren't necessarily decided. She's utilizing the deception of economy to get those votes. None of them have to do with the source of the plight, which is the mistreatment of black people who were and still are in the system of slavery. No politician thus far has ever done anything specifically to help black people and further oppressed people, original and native, aboriginal people across the planet. We don't have any specific solution geared towards us. It's always playing on our emotional heartstrings, dealing with money. Here it says on day one, she's going to take on corporate price gouging. And so those of us who are consumers who don't have money, we can be emotionally swayed by her promises because we say, you know what? We can step into, this is the problem when we don't have our own. When you have your own, you can identify with your own plight and your own struggles. So if I have my own, I can say, you know what? Everyone in my family needs new shoes. That's if I have my own. I say, you know what? I'm taking care of my family. Everybody needs new shoes. So I can take the responsibility and get them new shoes. Whereas if I don't have my own and I'm subjected to someone else's rulership, someone else politician to make decisions, I can come in with some form of desire, but it's not my own to control. So I'm just going to be listening to the politician. So when the politician comes in, I might be thinking about new shoes, but when then the politician says, okay, on day one, I'm taking out corporate price gouging. Then you can say, oh, you know what? I never thought about corporate price gouging. Oh, man. Yeah. You start to forget about your own needs and you start thinking about the needs that someone else is presenting for you. You know, I was watching this movie. It's called Zootopia. Um, and at the end, you know, it's a children's movie. For those of us who have children, you might have watched it before. And the fox was talking to the rabbit, and he was trying to prepare her to speak in front of the public. And he was like, you know what? If you want to sound smart, you want to know politics 101, you answer their questions with a question and then answer your question. So they were asking her questions, and then she said, they were asking her, you know, whatever questions, and she made a she asked the question, is it having to do with all mammals being predators? Yes, it is. So that's the type of deception that these politicians are using against us as a collective. We don't have an organized need. We are just organized behind the needs that they are giving us. We haven't decided collectively what we want. The Muslims have. Muslims want separation. We want freedom, a real freedom. But the rest of us collectively have not decided. And I'm saying decided, decision. Scission meaning cut. So we have not made an effective cut, a separation. It has not been made so clear for us that we won't accept anything else. And that's the problem. We don't know the art of negotiation, the art of war. We don't know the art of independence. So when a politician comes in front of us and starts making these promises, we don't even have the tools to know, or the discernment and judgment initially to know whether they're sincere promises or false promises. Like I said, when we're consumers, we don't know that a promise is false until it's too late. Somebody says, oh, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then time passes and you can ask, well, what happened? Oh, well, you know. And then I know this from experience. You know, this is the difference between a covenant and a contract. Allah, God, deals with covenants. You can see all throughout the Bible, throughout the Quran, Torah, Allah, God, deals with covenants. Covenants, meaning that he is, you know, in our prayer, it says, my life and my death, my prayer, my sacrifice, my life and my death are all for Allah. Allah, meaning a covenant, preparing a covenant is where his words are made bond. That's what a covenant is. There's no necessary need to have things written because it's a promise. We know that Allah makes full on all his promises. His word is bond. Well, in the Bible, in the Quran, and in the scripture, where Allah made a covenant with man, but man went against that covenant. That's why contracts needed to be established and installed, because man did not keep his word bond in accordance to the covenant of God. A contract was necessary. That's where contracts needed to be introduced. All right, this is what we're talking about. Sign here. And now God, knowing the weakness of man, put it in the Quran how to establish relationships and contracts with your fellow brothers. So when you're dealing with people, I have an experience with this. You're dealing with people who you trust and you care about. Covenants can be established because you're dealing with that divine nature within yourself. But when one person goes against that nature, that Muslim nature, submitting to that divinity in self, again, Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that the nature of the original man is Muslim, he who submits to the will of God. When we go against our nature and we start to lean into our lower base nature, start to lean into our devilish characteristics, that's when contracts are necessary. So with all that being said, we should already be able to know, being producers, that the United States government and the system of white supremacy, at never, in no point in time, had they ever maintained their word or their treaty with any native or original people in the hills of North America or anywhere on the planet. Never once did they make a treaty and they stuck by it to us as Aboriginal and Native people on the planet. You can go everywhere where original people are, and every single collective group of people have horror stories dealing with the United States and the system of white supremacy. Horror stories. They say one thing and mean another. They have promises, but they are false promises. And I'm saying that that is not changing. But unless you have a proactive mind, you won't know that what they're saying is false ahead of time. You have to wait until later. And a lot of us are subjected to that. So it says that she's going to ban more of those hidden fees and surprise late charges that banks and other companies use to pad their profits. That alone is speaking to not the base needs of a people. She's not speaking towards our real needs. She's speaking towards needs that she constructed and forced us to have. And this is the problem when we don't have our own. And so through recognizing the deception, we can begin to construct our own. The last thing she said, she asserted that her administration would also take on big pharma to lower prescription drug costs. If you're a consumer, that sounds delightful. That sounds amazing to you because you're dependent and you're consuming the pharmaceutical drugs. It's a vicious system that we're subjected to. The same system that teaches you to eat the wrong foods, live the wrong lifestyles, learn the wrong education, treat people in a wrong way. It's the same system that's introducing these wrong directions that they're presenting you with the wrong solutions. The same doctor that tells you that you have a certain ailment, who won't tell you to eat better, will prescribe you the medications, furthering your dependence. It's a system of dependency. This is why we were declaring war on dependence. We don't want to be dependent. We want to be independent. So when it says here her administration is going to take on big pharma to lower prescription drug costs, that sounds good to the consumer. That sounds good to the person who's subjected to their survival mind, not their producer mind. They're consumers. This is message to the consumer. This is why we want to transition out of being a consumer. We don't want to be consumers. Because if you really look at this with your righteous mind, and you say, hold on. Because we have our own needs. We represent ourselves. I don't need you, Democrat. I don't need you, Republican, the politician. We don't need them. They need us. So we can come into this negotiation with leverage to say, you know what? Hold on. You're talking way too fast. Slow down. You said here on day one, you're gonna take on corporate price gouging and bring down costs. Stop right there. I don't want to hear what you got to say. How are you going to do that? Show me the plan. Show me. And this all of these things will give us information, so we don't even need to be dependent. You know, I want to say real quickly, because my father said it was important to say, I'm not a minister, so I'm not I want to be real, real clear. That's not my desire. Before I began to even get on here and have discussions, y'all seen, those of you who follow my Instagram, you seen what I was doing, focusing on fixing things. I still do that, focusing on business. I can't even really, in my right mind, say that I'm a businessman, but Allah is not, through having conversation, Allah won't, He's not even allowing me to let either one down. I'm not considered a minister. I don't go through the ministry class. I'm not a minister. I'm also not a quote unquote businessman, but I do delve in business. And He'll never let me set this down rightfully. And I can't even stop doing business. So I don't know the category. Maybe throughout time I can come to terms with, all praise due to Allah. My uncle reached out to me and said, "You know what, brother? Allah put you on post, and I have to be able to come to terms with what that means." So, you know, that's anyway. Not to change the subject too much. So I'm not a minister. I do find value in ministry and teaching and speech and things that way. But the teaching most honorable Elijah Muhammad is what's most important to execute upon. And I do delve in business. I enjoy business. I don't consider myself a quote unquote businessman. So anyway, with that being said, if we are looking at these problems from not a consumer, or excuse me, these if we're looking at these things that are being promised to us not as consumers to say, "Oh yes, help me," but no, we want to look at it as producers. When they start saying, when politicians come to us and they start saying, "We're going to do this, we're going to do that," we can tell them to hold on. Hold on. It says here, on day one, I will take on corporate price gouging and bring down costs. As a consumer, you might say, "Oh, my ego is stroked. Yay, I'm so happy and excited." I'm not a consumer. We want to be producers. So hold on, Kamala. You talking too fast. I don't want to hear what you're gonna do. Tell me how you are going to do it. So she says, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna bring down corporate gouging." She says, I'm gonna ban more hidden fees, and we're gonna take on corporate landlords and cap unfair rent increases." All that sounds really good, but I don't want to hear what sounds good. Tell me how you plan on doing that. Now, what happens is when we are producers, we're no longer consumers. We don't need the politician. We learn that the politicians need us. Then we can say we have our own needs. Our needs are, in our communities, we want to we want to have better education so that there's not as much crime. We want to be able to, you see all these broken down buildings? We want contracts to build these buildings so that we can house our own people. You see this broken down restaurant that you're not using? We want to put our people in employeeship and ownership so that they can feed those in need. So if we have our own needs and we take a look at the things that the politicians are promising us, then we can negotiate. We say, "Okay, I hear what you're saying you're going to do. What I want you to do is tell me exactly how you plan on doing that. And then what I need done is this. If you want us to vote for you, I want to make sure that this is done. You tell me how you're doing that, and then we can come to see." And this is the thing. If we can get the politician, again, I want to be real clear. The only solution for us is separation. We separate mentally. However, everything has a process. So this can be part of our process of separation. The only solution that works for us is separation. We don't need to be involved with these people. But the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that we want our own. If they don't give us our own, then we have stipulations. So this is our stipulation. If we can get this politician to explain to us how they plan on giving us these things, for example, if I'm getting into the process of negotiation, right? The Kamala Harris, "Oh yeah, I'll make promises." Okay, what are you promising? And she just did this in Atlanta, Georgia. So it says here, "We will take on corporate landlords and cap unfair rent increases." Okay, show me how you're gonna do that. How you plan to do that? They're gonna give us a whole, whatever, 300-page I forget what you call them. Starts with an M, not a memorandum. It'll come to me. Anyway, then she first, so they're gonna give a whole blueprint, proposal on what to do. Then, as a unit, we can have people who are looking page by page to extract the value of that. So then we no longer need to be dependent on what they can do for us, even if she doesn't win. She can say, "Oh yeah, I promise that we're gonna bring down uh rent increases." Okay, show me how. She says, "Oh yeah, we're gonna pass this bill, pass that bill, pass this bill." We say, "Okay, yeah, sounds good." Highlight those parts, and then we come to us and say, "Okay, we don't even need her. She just gave us the blueprint. How are we gonna do this?" It says pass this bill. Okay, so let's rally together, find the resources in our own community to say that this is what we need to do. We don't need to be dependent. We can have a very clear cut. She just gave us the plan already. We take that plan and we say, okay, let's do this then. We don't even need her. And by the time, let's say she does win, or whoever wins, after they've already given us the proposal, we have enough leverage to negotiate in real time to say, yeah, we saw that you said you was going to do this. We didn't already took care of 3/4 of it. We not only need you to do a quarter more, but also we've got more needs now. Because if you want us to vote for you, or we want us to continue to support you, then we have more needs. And that's how we can uh, 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 negotiate with them, or this is how we deal with them from a producer mind, not consumer mind. We can already see what consumerism has gotten us when we show up to the rallies and we get excited and we just listen to what they got to say without questioning any of it. This last one says she asserted that her administration would also take on big pharma to lower prescription drug costs. How are you going to take on big pharma? Aren't your sponsorships and your costs and your campaign, your marketing campaign, aren't they covered by corporate businesses? We could start asking these questions, and then they get caught up. I mean, you caught them, you catch them in these lies, and you make them nobody, you make them negotiate on a back foot. This is how we need to deal with these politicians if we're going to deal with them. I don't even think we need to deal with them. I think that we should separate, find ourselves in a different area. However, I will say that the things that they value as important, not only should it be important to them, but it also should be important to us. We should institute a healthcare program. We should learn how to not even just instituting a quote unquote restaurant that's backed by How to Eat to Live, but a system of health care that's backed by How to Eat to Live, so that people can go to our program step by step and learn how to wean themselves off of being dependent on these dietary foods that they've been subjected to in the system of white supremacy. Not just getting them off of the pig, but teaching them how to utilize the things that we have, the resources we have at our disposal. When I was at the farmers market and I was selling the pies and the navy bean burgers and those different products, I would tell the people, Most Elijah Muhammad teaches you can't take something from people without giving them something in return, because you're just going to leave them with nothing. And that's not Islam. The black man loves the devil because the devil gives him nothing. So we have to be more godly and not leaving people with nothing. We like to blow smoke where smoke don't belong. And so that's what makes us more devilish when we don't give people anything in return. The he loves the devil because the devil gives him nothing. And that's a measurement when we're dealing with people. This is a law of reciprocity. Not to give to expect, but we want to know what has this person agreed to do. I say, I agree on my end, I'll do X, Y, and Z. This person that we're dealing with agrees to do on X, Y, and Z. One person will give. If the other person doesn't reciprocate, then they're being more devilish, because we love the devil because the devil gives us nothing. That's a measurement. That's a mathematics. Okay. Now, not to get too far off topic, but I do want to say the when it comes to establishing a system. So when we can read these teachings of Most High Elijah Muhammad, we're not extracting information to share. We're extracting instructions to establish. There's nothing wrong with the brothers out there selling uh, newspapers, why don't we have newspaper stands? Why don't we have stores that can sell the newspaper also? These are teachings. This is the why I in the initial my opening, when I say perhaps most importantly, an example. Most Elijah Muhammad and Dr. Yusuf Base always taught teach by example. Give the people an example of how to execute these teachings. And Dr. Yusuf Bey, I can say only because uh, that's who my father gives credit for raising him up and giving him instructions according to the teaching of Most High Elijah Muhammad, that Dr. Yusuf Bey, is the best example of executing on these teachings in a real way so that we can survive this hail and this warfare that we're being presented with. So when it comes to these teachings, it's not to get the teachings just to share. It's not like, influencers and content producers, content influencers, just to share content so that people could hear and applaud and like and things like that without giving them instruction. That's not my purpose. That's why I say I'm not a minister. That's not my. I don't want to just be up here ministering and talking. I want to be able to say, okay, let's read these teachings because these are valuable. We know from the Most High Elijah Muhammad that they're valuable because he showed us an example. We know that these teachings are valuable because we saw Dr. Yusuf Bey execute the teachings and construct for himself and the people he loved and cared about in his community to give them a safe haven. So we know they work. So what I'm saying is we can look at these teachings and extract the wisdom and the instructions to say, you know what? It's not just all praise due to Allah that we were able to establish businesses, but these teachings, they are far more valuable than just businesses. They're far more valuable. According to these teachings, Most High Elijah Muhammad, this is the material that was used for God to even construct the universe. So it's very powerful teachings here. So when it says here, we will take on corporate landlords and cap unfair rent increases, I want to know what you plan on doing about that. Don't tell me what you're gonna do, especially if you are coming to me for a vote. I'm not gonna tell them this. I'm not voting for them, but I am listening. I'm listening to hear what they find valuable, because if the collective people who are applauding and they're saying yay for false promises, then we know that they find value in those words and those deeds and actions, even though it's coming from a false, deceptive person. What I mean by that is, and this is the reason why I said I'm not a businessman, but I do conduct business. Business, if you can boil what business down is, business is finding a need and producing the solution to that need. That's all business is. You find a need and you supply the people with that need. It's called supply and demand. You find the demand, you introduce the supply. So using my business mind, and I'm seeing all this. I'm not involved. I have no personal emotion involved. But I'm listening to what this lady is saying, and I'm utilizing my businessman mind. And she's presenting a supply, and the people are applauding, which is a confirmation of the demand. And I know that this woman, who represents a system of white supremacy, a devilish system, has no desire to fulfill these people with their demands and their needs. She has no desire to supply these people's demands. So she has no business of supplying our people with their demands. According to the teachings of the Most High Elijah Muhammad, the government wants to pacify. So her only desire is to pacify our people with telling them, I hear your needs, I hear your demands, but I have no business to supply them. I have no intention to supply them. So as a business man mind, remember, I don't consider myself a businessman. I haven't really come to terms with, I do business. I have businesses. Say if anything, I'm more of a family man, visionary type. But praise be to Allah. When I hear this representative of this system presenting these points using my business mind, I say, you know what? There's a need there. Obvious. I mean, it's obvious, but it's so obvious that we get paralyzed. Why are we still stuck in this position today if it's obvious? So I'm utilizing my business mind. I say, you know what? It's obvious to me that these people who are applauding this woman has needs that aren't being met, and she's promising to meet those needs. And I know, according to the teaching Most High Elijah Muhammad, this person has no desire to meet those needs. So then there's an opportunity. See, that's what business is, an opportunity to fulfill or to supply those demands. So then I said, okay, let's listen to what she said. She's going to go on corporate price gouging. So obviously the people are applauding. The government knows that uh, the businesses are dealing unjustly. So what do as Muslims? We introduce a just and righteous system of business. Not on the small scale, but we introduce on larger scale businesses. It says here corporate price gouging. So then us as Muslims should institute corporate righteous businesses. It says here charges, it says hidden fees and surprise late charges with banks. It's up for us to establish righteous banking systems that don't take advantage of the people. It says here we will take on corporate landlords and cap unfair rent increases. It's up for us to establish corporate, corporate, maybe corporate cooperation, but to, exactly how the Most High Elijah Muhammad taught us. You buy the buildings and you house your people. We do that on a corporate level. And says she asserted that her administration will also take on big pharma to lower prescription drug costs. First off, we should not even be dependent on big pharma. We already know that these politicians are funded by these big pharma corporations, so we already should know that these are lies. But as a business individual, as people who are in business, we should look at that as opportunities to say there's a big need for people to know that they shouldn't be dependent on pharmaceuticals, on pharmaceutical drugs. My proposal is that there's an increase in focus. It's a beautiful. I'm happy to see that collectively we are quote unquote waking up. This is what the teaching Most High Elijah Muhammad has been teaching us since day one, is to stand up and take care of business. So on that end, all praises are due to Allah. However, it's sad to see the levels of dependency and our focus. It's sad to see that we look to these politicians for guidance. It's sad that we look to these entertainers for guidance, and so much of our emotions are involved with these entertainers. I just saw the video of Snoop Dogg who had on the goat chain, and he was like, that type of stuff. I mean, shout out to the brother Cam, West Coast Cam. He initially checked Snoop Dogg for opening up a strip club. Him and his wife had opened up a strip club, and he tried to privately do it, but he couldn't get no response, so he did it in the public. So shout out to that brother. I think that was a very righteous thing to do. And the fact that needed to be done is on one side, and we're going to get into that. But on the other end, I think that we've gotten so dependent on our entertainers to lead the way that it's created a vicious cycle, because the entertainers know that they're jesters. That's part of their agreement, is to be able to acknowledge their role in society. They are entertainers. Some of them may be able to do certain things that might benefit people, but at the end of the day, they're just entertainers. And they have come to terms with that. And so we collectively, as a people, righteous people, have put too much uh, dependency and not enough pressure on the rappers being at the forefront of righteousness. Now, at one point in time, uh, from my memory, I may be wrong, but from my memory, when it came to Your Black Muslim Bakery, it was the rappers and entertainers that came and sought guidance from the bakery, and it was the Muslims and the FOI that were inspiring to the rappers. The rappers wanted to have and come and take pictures with the Muslims. Now, unfortunately, we see Muslims who are flocking towards the rappers, and they get excited when they see rappers and entertainers, and they want to take pictures. Oh, look who I'm with. I'm with this person. I'm with that. To my knowledge, I may be wrong. I might live in some, I tell people I was born in heaven. So it might be I'm thinking from a fantasy, but to me, if I'm speaking from the Bible, wherein it says, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, like it is on heaven on earth, thy kingdom come, heaven on earth. Those are the types of things that I want to bring from my mind onto earth. I no longer like the idea that us as a people keep looking to these rappers on how to be able to take care and be righteous individuals. I think that we should establish something for ourselves so that the rappers have to look to us and have to check in with us to be like, yo, I need permission. Is it cool? I know I've been messing up. No, you can't do that. Take that down. That's how it was initially. I don't know how we got to the point where it's no longer like that, but I think we need to get back to that point. So that leads me to the next topic at hand, which is failed duties. Now we're getting into an invincible truth. An invincible truth. We have here the book called An Invincible Truth by Mosambi Elijah Muhammad. Again, I want to remind you today is August the 4th, and this article in An Invincible Truth, the article in An Invincible Truth is was written and published on August the 4th in 1956. August the 4th, 1956, which is exactly 68 years to the date. Exactly 68 years to the date. Okay. So here it says, if the civilized man fails to perform his duty, what must be done? So just a quick transition. We went from false promises that the politicians are making. Now, I'm not saying that it's Kamala Harris's fault. She's just the representative and the face and the tool of deception used by this system of white supremacy or this system of dependency. Excuse me. So now, because in order to view the system properly, we had to transition out of consumerism into production, our producer mind. When we transition from consumer to producer, we accept our responsibility as civilized human beings, civilized men and civilized women. So the question here is, if the civilized man fails to perform his duty, what must be done? So it says the civilized man, his duty is to teach civilization to the uncivilized, the arts and sciences of civilized people and countries of advanced civilization. So if you're anything like me, when I keep hearing this word civilized, I had to go to the lessons to figure out, okay, how is civilized design, define, excuse me. It says here, civilized means to teach the knowledge and wisdom of the human family of the planet Earth. That's according to our lessons, to teach the knowledge and wisdom of the human family of the planet Earth. Now, if we're just consuming that information, we can keep moving. We can keep moving. But we don't want to just be consumers. As producers, we look at things as material. So if I'm looking at that, I say, hold on, that's some good material, but I need more clarification. I need clarity. Because here it says civilized means to teach the knowledge and wisdom. So we understand what knowledge is. Knowledge is the accumulation or the gathering of information. And then we want to retain that information. So once that information is retained after it's gathered, that's called knowledge. So we have a lot of knowledgeable people who can teach knowledge. You go on YouTube, and there's a whole bunch of people teaching knowledge. But then we have this word wisdom. It says civilized means to teach the knowledge and wisdom. That's where responsibility comes into play, because that's not just speaking. We know, those of us who are in mathematics and submit to Islam, we know that wisdom is the application of knowledge. Knowledge is the acquisition and the retaining of information. That's what knowledge is. But wisdom is application on that knowledge. So you can't teach somebody how to be wise by speaking. And this is, again, why I don't consider myself a minister. I don't find initial value in just speaking. There is value in speech, how the Bible says first was the word, but that's not the duty of the civilized man. So it says here, if civilized means, it says the civilized mean his duty is to teach civilization, and civilized means to teach the knowledge and wisdom of the human family. So that means not only to teach what we know, but to show and prove, to teach by how Most High Elijah Muhammad and Dr. Yusuf Bey teaches, to teach by example. So not just standing and talking, but show us how this is applicable in real life. And so if we get in biblical and I say, my life and my death are all for Allah, my prayer, my sacrifice, my life, and my death are all for Allah. This can be considered an altar, and I pray that my actions are categorized as a proper sacrifice so that I can teach not only the knowledge, but also sacrifice what I have to teach wisdom so that I'm not falling victim to, it says, if the civilized man fails to perform his duty. Okay? So we know it says here, civilized means to teach the knowledge and wisdom. Now, I want to be real clear, because in our lessons, this information, this knowledge is so clear when reading that we could get lost in the knowledge and forget about the wisdom. But we understand these lessons that we have are called supreme wisdom lessons. Supreme wisdom lessons. So it's not for us to just teach by word, but it's also to teach by deed and by action, by application of that knowledge. So this leads me to the next question. And this is like that double-edged sword, because I'm listening as I'm speaking, all praise due to Allah. Allah is being able to utilize me as a vessel to articulate these teachings, but I also fall victim to the same things that are coming out of my mouth. So I have to be able to say, well, brother, you teaching, where are you teaching by? You teaching knowledge, where are you teaching by example, by wisdom? And all I can say, okay, yes, sir. Now here it says in our lessons, why did Musa have a hard time to civilize the devil in 2000 BC? I'm gonna read this to you, because we're talking about civilization and what happens when the civilized man fails to perform his duty. Now it says here, because he was a savage. Talking about the devil. He was a savage. Now, what is a savage? This is important. So, savage means a person that has lost the knowledge of himself and who is living a beast life. So, when we see that, we can realize and recognize that even though by nature the original man is Muslim, when the original man has no knowledge of who he is, he's living a savage and a beast life. So, this concept of Musa having a hard time to civilize the devil doesn't just categorize the Caucasians who are living a beast life, but it's also the original man who has lost the knowledge of himself and is also living a savage and beast life. So we fall right in line, those of us who are not living in accordance to our nature. We fall right in line. And I'm not exempt from that. Anytime I can realize and recognize where I'm not in alignment with these teachings, I need to be able to be back on track in my discipline. This is where it gets deeper. It says here, savage means a person that has lost the knowledge of himself and who is living a beast life. Musa was a half original and a prophet. And then civilized means to teach the knowledge and wisdom of the human family of the planet Earth. Now, this is where we get into defining activities or instructions on how to properly civilize, not only in knowledge, but in wisdom. So it says here, Musa came 2,000 years later and taught him how to live a respectful life and how to build a home for himself. How to live a respectful life and build a home for himself. Now, that's instruction. Because we could take a look at ourselves, myself included, speaking to myself, and I say, okay, if savage means a person who has lost the knowledge of himself and is living a beast life, and Musa came and he had a hard time civilizing the savage, and civilized means to teach the knowledge and wisdom, teaching by example to the human family of the planet. I said, where in my life do I need the same Islam where I'm not maybe living a respectful life, or I need some assistance on building a home for myself? I said, okay, that sounds like instructions. Focus on increasing my life in a royal and respectful way, in a real way, not in imagery, but in a real way. That's an instruction. Another instruction is, it says he taught Musa taught how to build a home for himself. Well, I don't know about you, but I know a woman's job is to turn a house into a home. But as a man, I've never built no house. I definitely am interested into it. So that sounds like instruction. That sounds like a real tangible instruction on learning some form of construction, how to build. And that's the beauty of business. You learn to build, and then you leverage the business to build yourself a home. And so this is what, when our teaching says the civilized man, his duty is to teach civilization to the uncivilized, many times the uncivilized person is ourselves. You know, I tell a story all the time about my uncle Nadar. When I was in Oakland and I was teaching, I taught high school in East Oakland and sixth grade in West Oakland. And I was spending a lot of time out of the house. You know, I was with a brother. They call it in the mosque, they call it sojourn, selling newspapers and stuff like that. And I learned a lot about how to, you know, buy a product for $1 and sell it for $2. You know, and that's the difference between hustling and establishing a business. Most of us have some type of hustle, and we think that it's business. When you buy something for $1, you sell it for $2. That's a hustle. Business is establishing a system, totally different. You need hustle in the business, but it's two different types of energies to establish a system, establishing a business, building a home for your product. Now, my uncle Nadar used to tell me he had good foresight. He would say, brother, before you go out into this world and try to save the world, make sure you save your family. And so in context, what he was saying is before you try to civilize the world, make sure your family is in proper health and civilized. And I was having a conversation with my pops, and he said, after I was telling him this, I told him, um, that's what my uncle Nadar said. And my pops would say, what's the duty of he asked me, he said, what's the duty of the civilized man? And I told him, it's to teach civilization to the uncivilized. And he asked me, he said, who do you know that's more uncivilized than your children? And I said, you know what? That's right. That's true. That's true. So point being is we don't have to look too far to find people that are in need of what we have. I know the Bible says that Jesus said that a prophet has no honor in his home. But Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad also told us that the days of the prophets are done. We don't have no need for no prophet. I understand what he was saying, that most times that when you have something valuable, the people who are in your home are the ones who value it least, and the people who are outside of your home value it the most. So I get that, and that's a real factor. But also, it teaches resilience and it teaches endurance to be able to provide value to your family, and them not immediately being able to recognize its value. We have to have foresight and have to be able to look at the quote unquote long game, or we have to be able, we have to be able to not be so dependent on immediate gratification. It's called delayed gratification. So it is our children who need us the most. Those of us who have children, we have to be able to take care of our children. I know it looks like the world needs saving, and that's true, but I can only suggest what I found value, just like my uncle Nadar told me, before you try to go and save the world, make sure your family is in good health. And so I know that a lot of us can get caught up when we have children. It's easier to go outside of the house and find people you can help. It's much more difficult to spend time with our children. It's way more difficult and way less congratulatory. Like, people way less praised. Is way less appreciated initially. People outside they'll give you claps and hand claps. In your house, you're not gonna get that. You might get a little thank you, but everything else is expected. Now, that's no disrespect to my family. I love my family, and we are growing together. But I do recognize the truth in that, and it teaches endurance, and it also gives you an opportunity to learn by experiment, by example. You teach yourself, okay, if I know that my family, or if I know that the needs of the world are, and then I can look at, okay, well, my family is a miniature example of the world, then you give them the solution that you think that the world needs, just to see if it works. A lot of us are leaving the house to try to go fix the world and neglecting our family. And that's what's going to happen is the same things you try to fix in the world, your family is going to look at how you're neglecting them, and they're going to, because they see what's getting your attention, they look at, oh, well, no disrespect, but they're like, oh, the drug addicts are getting all your attention. So they're going to say, well, you know what? If my father is giving his attention to the drug addicts, then, being mathematical, they're going to go experiment with those to get your attention. It's, and there has to be a balance. I think I done gone off too far off topic, but it says here, a divine messenger of God, excuse me, a divine messenger of God Allah raised among his people with the divine message is held responsible for its delivery. His message teaches spiritual civilization, which is important to the success of a nation and society. According to history, the people who refuse to accept divine guidance or his message sent by his messengers are classified as uncivilized or savages. Praise due to Allah. And see, you can tell this is the mathematics that we get it from the lessons, and the messenger's teachings are the lessons that go hand in hand. This is all the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. It says a well-educated, cultured, and courteous people make a beautiful society when it is spiritual. So here he's giving us the opportunity to acknowledge both, not being overly ridiculously spiritual to a sense that we quote unquote forget to shower and clean ourselves and we look savage like. And then he's also saying that our business presentation is important, but not too heavily dependent on our image. So they go hand in hand. A well educated, cultured, and courteous people make a beautiful society when it is spiritual. Good manners come from a civilized man who doesn't fail to perform his duty. So, on one end, this is good knowledge, but I don't want us to get caught into consuming the knowledge. I want us to search for the instruction, the wisdom, how to apply. So, this is mathematics here. Where you see words, a Muslim will see numbers. So, I'll tell you the equation that I see. It says good manners come from the civilized man who doesn't fail to perform his duty. So, I see the equal sign is good manners. The plus sign, we have one number, which is civilized man. Plus sign, doesn't fail to perform his duty, equals good manners. So we have civilized man plus not failing to perform your duty, that equals good manners. So then how does that mathematical equation become measurement? You know, it says Islam is mathematics, mathematics is Islam, and can be proven at no limited time. Well, proven and measures go hand in hand. This is how, you know, the Most High Elijah Muhammad teaches us that Master Farad Muhammad stood on the planet Earth and measured all that is therein. How do we have proof that he measured the earth? Because we have the measurements, we have the mathematics, we have the proof. So that's how it does. It never ends in that fashion. So how do we know that a civilized man has not failed to perform his duty? How do we know what measurement do we have? Because they have good manners. All praise is due to Allah. So good manners are much more important than we thought. There are several civilizations we have. No, excuse me. There are several civilizations we have a wicked. There are several civilizations. We have a wicked one and a righteous one. It is a righteous civilization that is in the workings now. We all have been well trained into the wicked civilization. Now we must be trained into the knowledge of the righteous one. We must be trained into the knowledge of the righteous one. We must have a righteous, trained, civilized man who will not fail to perform his duty to us in guiding and teaching us. My people in America, the so-called Negroes, are under the searchlight of the righteous who are offering to them the right guidance to a supreme civilization of righteousness never witnessed before on Earth. The white race has failed to perform its duty of civilizing the American so called Negroes, has failed their duty. Of course, just a brief note, I want to say that um, out here in Hawaii, I see a lot of these local brothers with their sticker and it says uncivilized. And it's like a bittersweet because on one end, I'm like, that is a form of rebellion against colonialism, against the missionaries who came to try and quote unquote civilize the indigenous or native people here. So on one end, it's rebellion, but on the opposite end, it's almost of shooting yourself in the foot, in your own foot, because you're mad at the next man. Because savagery, in that sense, has never garnered any people success or has not garnered or gathered any of us respect. When you establish a kingdom or a governance, you want civilization. You want people to cooperate. You don't want savagery. So on one end, I see the value in the stickers that say uncivilized, but on the opposite end, I see where it's self-harm. It's cutting. It's called cutting your nose and spite your face. You don't like how you look, so you cut your own nose. You know, and that's not healthy. So it says here the white race has failed to perform its duty of civilizing the American so-called Negroes. Of course, they have been their slaves for many centuries, and the slave masters have rights over them as long as they are his slaves. However, if the slave masters free their slaves, not in words, but in deeds, remember we talked about false promises? Not in words, but in deeds. The slave masters should provide the once slaves with the right civilization and with everything necessary for them to start an independent life as their slave masters have. That's what we want. We want freedom and independence. Just a brief reminder, a example, all praise due to Allah, an example of freedom and independence for ourselves is acknowledging where our water comes from. So Allah has blessed me with the opportunity to show forth on how to generate independence at my home, where I'm not dependent on the city and county to turn on my water faucet and then wait for them so that give them the opportunity to poison my water with fluoride. Where here at this home, we collect water from the rooftop and then we store it in a water catchment, giving the family freedom and independence on one of the most important. It's a seed of independence, which is water. So that's where the wisdom aspect comes in. All praises are due to Allah. I don't want to put myself out there like that, but that's just, yeah. So it says here, certainly the so-called Negroes are being schooled. Certainly, again, I want to not get caught up on the word Negroes, thinking that it's kind of disrespectful if I say Negro and you only think about black people, and black people you only think about yourself. That's disrespectful, and that's being stereotypical. All right, so I think we should, because if you have any group of people who's out here calling themselves niggas, if you gonna sit here and call yourself a nigga, then you better get in line and get civilized right along with us. So it says here, the so-called Negroes. Most Elijah Muhammad says Negroes, so-called Negroes, because that's what the system of white supremacy called us. They called us Negro. In Spanish, Negro means black, and in Latin, it goes necro, which means dead. So it wasn't just the ex-slaves in the United States that was called Negro. So-called Negro is planetary. All across the planet, wherever these Europeans went, they all called original people Negro or Necro. Negro meaning black and Necro meaning dead. All Europeans called the darker folk on the planet, whether it be original, aboriginal, indigenous, and native people on the planet. All y'all was some niggas. So when Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is teaching us, the so-called Negro, he's saying he the messenger, brother, your brother Elijah Muhammad, messenger to you all, messenger of Allah to us all of us original people. certainly, certainly, I might as well just say them niggas, some niggas. Certainly, the niggas is being schooled, but is it the equal of their slave masters? No. Are the schools in the hood where we have all original people, the schools, and I'm talking about you have a hood in every major city in every state. So that should just teach us how ignorant that we've been made. Do the schools in the hood, are they taught and treated the same as the wealthy neighborhoods? No. So then that's across the board. That are the schools in the barrios for our Hispanics, the schools in the barrios the same as the private schools in the richer neighborhoods? No. Are the schools in the hood over here on the islands, are they the same as the wealthy and privileged public schools? I mean, excuse me, the wealthy and the privileged private schools? No. Are the schools in on the reservations, are they the same in the same condition as the private schools, the more wealthier schools? Do they teach the same thing? No. Dr. Yusuf Bey taught you can judge a tree by the fruit it bears. So we take a look at the fruit. Obviously, wealthy people are producing children that are more productive in their society. So we should be able to take it upon ourselves to understand that our education system that we're subjected to in the public school system isn't producing the fruit that we want. So here it says, is it the equal to the slave masters? No. The so-called Negroes are still begging for equal education. After being blinded to the knowledge of self and their own kind for 400 years, the slave masters refuse to civilize the so-called Negroes, the Necros, into the knowledge of themselves of which they were robbed. The slave masters also persecute and hinder anyone who tries to perform this most rightful duty. I'm going to say that again. It says the slave masters also persecute and hinder anyone who tries to perform this most rightful duty. I will continue to say that as long as the so-called Negroes don't know who they really are and do not have the knowledge to free themselves from their slave masters' names and religion, they can't be considered free or civilized. This is some mathematics again. This is how you know how you can measurement your freedom and your how you measure your level of independence. It says, as long as the so-called Negroes, don't know who they really are and do not have the knowledge to free themselves from their slave masters' names and religion, they can't be considered free or civilized. So as long as you go around and calling yourselves Jones and Johnsons and Smiths and Williams and all of that, you can't be considered free. And as long as you are dependent on a quote unquote white Jesus, you're not going to be free and independent. To this, their slave masters will agree. Some of the so-called Negroes are ignorant to this important advantage of having their own nation's names. They think there is nothing to a name. It isn't to the ones they are using, but the Bible says a good name is better than gold. To continue to bear the slave masters' names makes them property of their slave masters, and they could never hope to receive equal recognition in the civilized world. Will a free people accept slaves as their equal? That's a good question. Will a free people accept slaves as their equal? The so-called Negroes must be truly civilized, and the right civilized man has not performed his duty until this is accomplished. However, the so-called Negro is free to receive his or her own if they just don't allow fear and ignorance to stand in their way. It says here, it has been seen from the little chance they have had to get a little education They have shown and proven that they are the original people who are only asleep and in great need of the right civilized man who will perform his duty and awakening them. The so-called Negro's fear of being deprived of food, clothing, and shelter, also the usual smile of the white slave master's children, prevents them from seeking the true knowledge of their own nation's civilization. Now, I want to really quickly take a mathematical viewpoint of this, because in mathematics sometimes you can have unknown variables. So that's where you say x plus 2 equals 4, and then you have to do on one side what you do the other to be able to find the value of the unknown variable. Brief note, that's why the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad gives us x when we remove the slave master's name from our names. He places an X there because it signifies unknown, that you acknowledge the fact that you don't know who you are, but that you are on a process of learning who you are and you submit to your one true God. So that X signifies or symbolizes an unknown variable. So here we can do the same thing and implement an unknown variable and find its value. Okay. So on mathematics, it says here, the so-called Negro's fear of being deprived of food, clothing, and shelter, also the unusual smile of the white slave master's children, prevents them from seeking the true knowledge of their own nation's civilization. So the equation we could take a look at on one side of the equal sign, it says we can ask, what is preventing them, us collectively, from seeking the true knowledge of our own nation's civilization? So if we look at a problem, remember we live in a time where the divine problem requires a divine solution. So it says here, when we want to know what is preventing us from seeking the true knowledge of our own nation's civilization, well, we can read this here and we look for the unknown variable. So it says the fear of being deprived of food. So our dependency on food. Okay. Our dependency on clothing. We don't know where our clothes are coming from. Okay. Dependency on shelter. We don't know we don't know how to build a home for ourselves. Okay. Also, this is the unknown variable now. The usual smile of the white slave master's children. Now, I say we remove that and place an X for an unknown, because we've been able to come to terms with the system of white supremacy, and they've gotten to the point where they've got to utilize our own woman. So now that X is interchangeable. Not only the usual smile of the white slave master's children, but now we have to have discernment when it comes to the system of white supremacy, all of their puppets and tools and their tools of deception. We have to have discernment on all tools that they're utilizing, all variables that are unknown. We have to have discernment for. And that is what is preventing us from seeking the true knowledge, is fear and dependency on food, clothing, and shelter, and being deceived from people who look just like us. That's mathematics. They must drop the slave master's name and religion, of which both names and religion they have and don't understand, which means nothing but slavery. Of course, not all, some, not all preachers and politicians who live off of the ignorance of their people are opposed to the right civilization of our people, the so-called Negroes. So we not only got to look out for the politicians, but we got to look out for the preachers. And not only do we got to look out for the preachers, we got to look out for the politicians. And also I want to remind us in Message to the Black Man, where it says that the woman in Revelation is actually signifying the last apostle of God. When it comes to people who are in our communities, in our environment, who are presenting these divine words of God, they are fashioning themselves into the likeness of a woman. So we have to be able to acknowledge. That's why I don't call myself a minister and a preacher like that. we have to be able to acknowledge the preachers as also being tools of deception, just like the first, the last, and the greatest um, tool of deception being the woman is also the preachers and the politicians, those who come into the likeness or messengers of the light. So it says, our people are taught to eat the wrong foods and drinks, games of chance, gambling. Our people are taught to eat the wrong foods. So we need to establish a system where they're learning to eat the right foods. Games of chance, gambling. We don't do that in Islam. Going half dressed, modesty. Looking for salvation after death. And not giving a hoot for salvation in this life, as right civilization teaches us. It says here, as right civilization teaches us, come and follow the right guide and be rightly civilized. So that's in the book, An Invincible Truth, on August 4th, 1956. And today is August 4th in 2024, which is exactly 68 years. So here, a brief recap, we went over false promises. According to the teaching of Most High Elijah Muhammad, says, beware of the false promises. Who is making these false promises? In the message to the black man, according to the teaching of Most High Elijah Muhammad, he's telling us to be aware of the devil's, the system of white supremacy, utilizing their last and greatest trick, which is the original woman. So we must be mindful of the things, the false promises or promises that the system utilizing Kamala Harris, not just Kamala Harris, but the preachers and the pastors, people who are utilizing people that look like us, Megan Thee Stallion for endorsements, Quavo, the entertainer, using them for endorsements. So you see all of these tools go hand in hand of deception. And if we get caught up into it, we will be deceived. And so the importance here is not getting caught in trying to choose which politician is meant for us, but rather extracting the important details and requirements for rulership and productivity. Remember, we're transitioning out of being consumers and we want to be producers, and they're teaching us the valuable aspects. Remember, supply and demand. The demands of the people is where our supply comes from. Our supply, if the people are demanding righteousness and justice, us as business minded producers are here to establish and introduce to the people righteous and justice products, righteous and justice uh, um, supply, to supply them with righteousness and justice. And then, according to the teachings of Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, giving us the instructions on civilizing the uncivilized. That's the supply and demand. And then what happens when we don't do it? We can look at the result, and our lessons will tell us the result. And next week, God willing, inshallah, on August the 11th, we're going to go over where it says, when a civilized man fails to perform his duty, what must be done? So not only do we have a system of cause, but we want to participate, establish, and live in a system of effect. That is justice, cause and effect. You have an action and a consequence. And we have to be able to submit to our requirements and the consequences when we don't submit to those requirements. All praises are due to Allah. Okay. Now, I have a few people here on, before I let you go, I have a few people on Instagram, or excuse me, on YouTube, and somebody on Instagram. So before I let you go, I'm going to, I have here on the bottom, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'm going to leave it open for a few minutes. If you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything, It can be related, it can be unrelated. Anything you have that you want to add, feel free to do so here. And if not, then uh, I will let you get back to your day. Um, oh, one thing I want to be able to remember this. I'm gonna be continue to say this in the beginning, but I want to be able to say it now. These meetings, uh, it may seem like this is the Sunday is the end of the week, but actually, the way that I'm utilizing them as a tool in my life is this is the beginning. This sets the tone for my week. I don't end the week on this teaching. I begin my week on this meeting, this information, and then obviously after that, it comes application. I take this teaching with me in my business, dealings with uh, uh, you know people, in dealings with my family, and then obviously there are other aspects. And then on Sunday again, I go back into and starting of the new week. Okay, so I'm not utilizing this to end the week. It's to have a proper cause and then reap the benefits of the effect. Okay. So I didn't mean to overload that. If you have any questions, feel free to ask your questions. If not, I will greet you as I came in the universal understanding of peace. Assalamu alaikum.